Hello, I'm Mischievous Marcinacchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy number 15, and all of the Amazing Spider-Man annuals, which I say do not count.
And I'm Dapper Dan Gavoston, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which I say count. Definitely. But for me, Amazing Fantasy 15 remains a fantasy.
You are very consistent and strident in your views, Dan, and I respect you for it.
Great.
Welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, and if you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, subscribe to Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review to help spread the word about our show. These reviews are important as they're the best way to spread the word about the show and indicate the size of our audience to guests and collaborators. And Mark, I may be strident in my opinion, but on that note, one podcast reviewer suggested that if you, Mark, didn't acknowledge that Marvel UK's Super Spider-Man, a series that seems to have run for 3 years in another country, counts towards a complete collection, that they would spike our numbers with a series of 1-star reviews. So what say you, Mark?
I mean, it depends. Are they like high-end contributors to the Patreon? Because, you know, like money talks around here, and you can threaten my star ratings all you want, but like unless you got the do re mi for me, whatever. You can for the record, no, it doesn't count. If I can't get the comics in America, it doesn't count because, you know, America, right? I mean, we got an election coming up. America. That's all I'm going to say about that, Dan.
This is the season for feeling good about America, for sure, for sure. So speaking of the Patreon, Mark, how does that help our show?
Well, the podcast exists because of the support of our Patreon members, including the ones that, you know, want us to get Super Spider-Man or whatever this comic is called. If you want to receive early episodes, exclusive artwork, and keep this podcast going, go to amazingspidertalk.com and consider joining our Patreon and get all the information you need on the website there.
Awesome. Well, today on the show, Mark and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 6, number 58. I don't know if amazing is like on the taxonomy of like adjectives, if it's like higher or lower than super. How would you rank those things?
I would say, I mean, it's amazing, Dan. We're an Amazing Spider Talk, Amazing Spider-Man podcast, Amazing Trump Super, Amazing Trump Spectacular, Amazing Trump Sensational. Just stop messing around with it. We're amazing, Dan.
All right, hear ye, hear ye. Well, this issue was written by Zeb Wells. The cover features artwork by John Romita Jr., Scott Hanna, and Morry Hollowell. The interior pages feature pencils by John Romita Jr., inks by Scott Hanna, colors by Marcio Menyz, and of course, letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. This issue was first released on September 25th, 2024. And after our review, stick around. Our video editor, Alex Galucki, and I had a chance to visit this year's Baltimore Comic-Con, my favorite convention of them all. And we sat down with an artist at the event who let us in on a little secret, which is probably going to be a big reveal to many of you. Yes, I think we can reveal who is going to be drawing issues of Amazing Spider-Man during the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man storyline, one of the artists that's been yet to be announced. But I also think that the name that we're going to release at the end of this episode in that section is also going to be an artist who will be a big part of the relaunched creative team after that story. So in many ways, I think by the end of this episode, we can tell you what the next Amazing Spider-Man creative team will likely be. So, yup, that's another Amazing Spider Talk exclusive that's bound to get us blacklisted somewhere. So make sure you hang out after Mark and my review for that bombshell news. So let's start this off. My feeling about this issue, and I think we're going to have a little bit different opinions of this, is you know that ongoing Family Guy joke where Peter fights a chicken for an inordinately long amount of time? I feel like this story arc is about to become one of those chicken fights. We've got all these like advertisements for the next issue being like the most violent fight in the history of Amazing Spider-Man, and maybe it will be. You know, I'm trying to think of what its contenders might be. Like, I wonder if John Romita Jr. is going to open a can of Kick-Ass within the pages of this comic. But like, so much of my feelings about this issue, and I liked it, were like, okay, like he's still fighting the chicken, you know, and I felt like there were some repeated beats that was like, okay, like Janice is about to get killed. Spider-Man comes in for the save. Janice is about to get killed. Spider-Man comes in for the save. And the more that I've kind of thought about it, the more I'm like, here's also how I felt. Sorry, this is going to trump the chicken analogy. I had fictional Dan Slott, who is my new favorite character I invented for the show, yelling in my ear about how much story he packs into every issue of Amazing Spider-Man. And this is like the anti-Dan Slott story. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because
Right.
I've read plenty of Dan Slott comics where they're just packed full of story, and I don't care about it at all. Like, I don't care about the characters, their decisions. I'm so divorced from what's happening. It was called Volume 3 of Amazing Spider-Man. But with this one, I care. Like, the actions carry real weight. Like, Tombstone firing a gun while it took 2 or 3 pages to occur at his daughter, like, it was appropriately paced for the magnitude of that moment. But by the time I got done with the issue, I was like, oh, it's over? Like, that was really thin. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. I cared about everything in this issue. So I that's kind of how I felt. It's like, it's thin, but I liked it.
You done? You
Yeah.
good?
Yeah, I'm
All
good.
right.
I got it
All
out of my
right. All right.
system.
All right. Now, look, like, I'm not one to normally defend like this kind of decompressed storytelling, although I would say that, like, you know, Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley basically made a killing off of doing this for about 100 issues on Ultimate Spider-Man. I mean, I don't see anything about this comic that is meatier than the vast majority of their issues, but
It's a lot less wordy, at that.
Fair enough, fair enough. But like, here's where I come in. So interestingly enough, I've been kind of tepid on the first 2 issues of this arc, and this so far is my favorite issue of this storyline so far. And I think a big part of it has to do with the fact that, you know, and as I made joke of and was called out in a private text between you, me, and Available Alan, you know, we spent the very first 2 issues of this storyline having Spider-Man kind of go over the tenets of jurisprudence. But like, seriously, like it seemed like it was a very complicated and convoluted way to get to Spider-Man being a superhero, and you know, whether like this was the way he was going to finally outsmart and defeat Tombstone remains, you know, it was kind of like, at least at the time, kind of up in the air, remains to be seen. P.S. that storyline was basically dropped, and it became like, you know, if Spider-Man was going to take care of Tombstone, he was going to have to do it the way he's doing it in this issue. And the fact of the matter is, we get a comic here where it is a very straightforward drama being executed here. It is, you know, Tombstone he's Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, whatever, you know, scary monster of the week that you wanted to be, and he is going to kill Janice unless Spider-Man can save the day. And yeah, is it repetitive? Sure, the way those other movies are, but like, you understand the stakes very, very clearly. There were multiple moments even within the repetition where I was like, wait, is he gonna find a way now to succeed? He being Tombstone, is he gonna go through with it here? Because that's the thing. Like, when you watch those kind of scary movies, a lot of times the villain kills the person. You know what I mean? They kill the teenagers. Like it's part of the movie. And there was a part of me throughout this issue where I was like, oh, he's gonna get her. Okay, no, he didn't. Spider-Man saves the day again. And like it was very straightforward. It was very simple. But I feel like this storyline needed to recalibrate itself from the first two issues, which I felt were just overly convoluted and complicated. We don't need a Spider-Man story about the complexities of the legal system and why Tombstone can, and start questioning the logical fallacies of how Tombstone's attorney could get, he's basically being accused of running the largest criminal crime ring in New York City, and he can get out on bail within hours. I mean, come on, like this is, we were all sitting there being like, now how did that happen? And like,
I mean, more directly, he tried to kill Peter Parker with his bare hands. I mean, like,
right,
that Kingpin avoided the law because he would always hire henchmen to pull it off for him.
Right. But the point being was like these were logical fallacies that I think had us overthinking about the wrong things in a Spider-Man story. When I am reading a Spider-Man comic, I want to know what I want my focus to be on is how is Spider-Man going to save the day? And that's what we had in spades in this issue. It was Spider-Man saving the day. It was Spider-Man jumping through the window in the nick of time to get to Janice. It was Spider-Man like fighting with Tombstone, and then Tombstone still grabbing the ankle, but then dropping her, and then wondering, did she die? No, she didn't. She's off. Then Spider-Man in pursuit of both of them. It's Spider-Man throwing himself over Janice. And like, look, if you want to talk about like issues that are very fight heavy, and again, you could talk about the mix of dialogue in, but I would point to probably our favorite story of all time, which is Spider-Man versus Moreland in Coming Home. I don't know if it was part 3 or part 4 of that story, but the whole comic is basically like Moreland and Spider-Man, going at each other. Moreland clearly having the upper hand. Spider-Man going into hiding, and then Moreland being like, okay, I'm going to now try to kill this kid to draw you back out, or I'm going to do this to draw you back out. And that's the whole comic, and it's so effective because you understand the stakes. And I would say, I'm not necessarily comparing this comic to Coming Home, but like in terms of
an unfair comparison by any measure, but yeah.
Right. But I feel like in terms of setting up the stakes and just being so straightforward and delivering on it, I felt this was a very effective comic book.
I largely agree with everything that you're saying, and I'm going to hold back on my main criticism until the second half of the show, if only because that's where our show notes have us going.
Okay.
But I think the thing that kind of keeps me like from truly comparing that is the kind of like the thematic richness that it's not there. It's just like in terms of an action scene with Spider-Man and Tombstone as established by this story within the Zeb Wells run and the preceding eras of Tombstone. I appreciate a good I thought immediately of Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees with this, and I think that's definitely intentional. Like he is the monster movie, the Shape, the whatever you want to call him, But like I guess I kind of, and it's still yet to be concluded. So like this could be the bridge to obviously what's going to be a bigger fight, and who knows what kind of thematics will be at play there, or what other machinations are actually going on, which I'm going to discuss later in the episode. But I guess I kind of like hoped for there to be more between Spider-Man and Tombstone than just who can outpower the other one. I guess that's true with Moreland, but it really comes down to like the science or the mysticism, kind of angle that ends up being it. It's not that Spider-Man outpowers him. It's that he proves himself like worthy of sacrifice and also being a creature of science, which is thematically rich. And what we set up in this story thus far throughout the Wells run is that Tombstone is someone that is operating on multiple levels beyond just raw power. He is using his brain. He is someone that is like overlooked, but he has a secret, whether it's his fanged teeth for those bullies or the manipulative powers that he executed on Spider-Man earlier, or even in Gang War where he, it's willing to forego allyship. So to have it be just a straight kind of like, I'm going to shield you with my body against this guy that is kind of unthinkingly coming after, to me feels a little bit like short selling Tombstone and the richness of that character.
But that's the thing. I push back only because I feel like with the history that we have gotten over the duration of this run, this is almost like a cutting of the Gordian knot moment for Spider-Man, which is that, we saw in World Without Love, Tombstone kind of, obviously outsmarting Spider-Man, getting him to do his dirty work with the Roses people, and then, kind of coming around to gang war, which again, like, yeah, they were aligned for a short moment, but, like, Tombstone used that as an opportunity to grab all the power. He outsmarted Spider-Man again.
Yeah.
Then we come into the beginning of this arc, and Spider-Man thinks he's got him against the wall, and yet again, Tombstone comes out a winner. Like, these are rich characters where there's a lot of history, but like, if Spider-Man is gonna win, he's gonna have to clean Tombstone's clock. He's gonna have to beat him into submission. That is the only way I think it has been established through the arc of this arc of him winning here, because he can't, the deck is stacked against a hero like Spider-Man to outsmart or outwit or outmaneuver Tombstone. Like, Tombstone holds all the cards, and at the end of the day, what does Spider-Man have left except for being a hero? And being a hero in this case is him jumping through windows and forcing Tombstone to forcibly inserting himself into Tombstone's fight with his daughter and protecting his daughter and keeping him from winning physically, So that's why I see what you're saying, but like, for me, that's what makes it more effective, because we're past the point of Spider-Man trying another card. I don't know what other cards Spider-Man has at this point except to just physically punch and kick Tombstone.
I mean, there's a great moment in this where, like, he says, there's no coming back from this, Tombstone. Like, this is the end of the road. Like, if you go try to kill your daughter, like, I mean, I don't really know what Spider-Man has to threaten him with necessarily, given that he's tried locking him up and all this stuff. Like, he's not going to kill Tombstone. It would be my feeling, and I don't think this book is headed in that direction, because I think it would be fairly unearned if that's where this book is going, and I don't think now is the time to play that card.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I guess we're going to find out in the most violent, as the ads have said, the most violent fight in Amazing Spider-Man history next issue, and the cover already doesn't disappoint. And I thought that was especially cool, which brings me to like JR's artwork. This has really been a JR dominant story, as is any issue where he's doing the artwork. But like, I thought this was a really great example of like what sensibilities JR brings to the table versus all the other artists that have kind of cycled around this book. Like, I don't know any other artist paired with Zeb Wells that would take the time to show Tombstone loading the gun in like 3 or 4 panels. I think that is definitely, I don't know what the Marvel method is or whatever method Zeb and JR have worked up here, but that it changes so drastically when I almost said dramatic and drastic, and I made it one word.
Make it a word. I
will.
Dramatically.
Perfect. I don't know that any other artist would afford that amount of time and has the same pacing sensibilities as JR. And, an issue like this, I feel like that really comes to the forefront, including the sort of like physical tangibility of all these things, the gun clacking together, or even the fingers of Janice like scratching away the skin on Tombstone's face, which I found quite visceral. And honestly, I hope those scars stay and they don't pull like the Lizard where any change is not permanent. I think if your daughter scratches your eyes like that, you get to hold on to those scars in your design.
well said on all that. And like you said, I mean, this was a comic that was just like very solely in JR's wheelhouse. This is kind of what we have been waiting for in terms of since we heard that the last story of the Zeb Wells run was going to be a Tombstone story with JR. We kind of knew that it was going to be gritty and grimy and bloody and physical, and that's what we got here. Just a ton of great physical beats here. Like you said, lots of Spider-Man jumping through windows and broken glass and people falling and hitting, and like the force of the fall on Janice and kind of seeing her holding her arm and hobbling away, like it all felt very tactile in a way that you don't normally get in a Spider-Man comic book with other artists. I loved it.
Were there any particular moments that really stood out to you in regards to both Zeb's writing and not Tombstone and JR's penciling work? I can think of a few, but I want to give you a shot since you really like this comic.
Well, the moment I just mentioned, the Janice going out the window, I really appreciated the sequencing and just like I said, the tactile physicality of it. Like it just, it was kind of a low key moment where I wondered, oh wait, is this how Janice goes? You know what I mean? Because it really felt authentic and real in a way that we don't normally get in a Spider-Man comic. You don't normally see people falling out windows and kind of landing, on their front side and kind of like that moment of seeing her get up but clearly being hurt. And I feel like it was all really well executed and designed out in terms of like just getting the sheer blunt force of the fall. That was probably my highlight. I mean, obviously the double page splash of Spider-Man jumping through the window is just a gorgeous thing. The clawing of the eyes and just kind of seeing, again, the tactile blood under the fingernails of the scratch. You know what I mean? Again, like you don't get like these are visuals you don't get in a Spider-Man comic. Even Spider-Man versus Moreland, which was a very was JR and very knockdown drag out. Like you don't get that kind of just sheer physicality and griminess in a comic. So those are two that I would call out. Anything from your end?
Yeah, well, I mean, to go back to the window one, I love the reason it stood out to me is the specificity of it. Like Tombstone pulling on the fabric of Janice's, I think it's like her shoe or something like that, and it's stretching like that, and like even Spider-Man's head like knocking up against the wall. It felt like the perfect moment to have like a, oh no, if we just made one little bit different action, somebody wouldn't be dead. That's how I read it. It was just like, oh, like they're really highlighting the specifics of this for a reason. Now, obviously, everybody ended up okay-ish, but the whole issue is kind of like that. For me, there was a moment where, Tombstone gets ahead of Spider-Man, and he manages to like catch up to Janice and picks her up by her neck and slams her full body into the ground, and the panel goes vertical, and he's standing there with his whole body like rigid like Frankenstein as he's just full weight pressing her into the ground, and we get these images of her face reacting to being choked by her father, and his face starts to creep into the reflection of her eye like a little skull, and I thought that was really chilling. So I thought beautifully done stuff. Even just the physicality of like her, overturning trash cans or whatever it is to block him in the way. This was a swift moving comic, and I always love it when an artist, when Spider-Man's moving really quickly, when an artist removes the web lines from his costume and just renders him in like kind of a flat colors, like a Superman costume, to kind of highlight that like it's moving so quick even the artist couldn't render the webs. I know Mark Bagley likes to do that too, and I don't know, it's like it's a quirky detail of Spider-Man artists that showed up here, and It's something that I've never really got to mention on the show before. So now, speaking of something new I've never seen before, the end of the issue leading into the cover of the next. I can't think of a issue of Amazing Spider-Man that's done that, or any Spider-Man title, or really many comics that have done that. Certainly it's been done somewhere. But it reminds me of like the sequence during the Vulture fight where you had to turn the book sideways to read it. Like it's taking liberties with the medium of comics in a unique way. And I thought that was pretty cool. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, no, I thought it was phenomenally executed. I mean, like, it actually took me a couple of look-throughs of it to be like, oh, okay, that's what that is. You know what I mean? Like it seems so organically integrated that like I didn't even think of it as like a incomplete cliffhanger. You know what I mean? Like it just was like, you know. Was it bonus page count or actually what did they use a page that should have been the story to do the preview? I wasn't counting.
Yeah, I mean it's funny. I don't know if I would have preferred there not be a preview because it just works so well as like you said, the natural next page is
Right.
the preview. It's kind of cheeky and like funny in that way. But it would also be cool to have like not known what that cover would look like and find out that the cover literally picks up. But it was worth it for the laugh of the kind of like playing with the design. So I appreciate it. And I think it'd be a bummer too, like if you were reading a trade, which I'm sure doesn't include the next cover preview, if they don't like have the cover printed in there, because I think it's a really nice on the page joke. Or like wink wink to the style or format of the book. So I got a laugh out of it. I know that wasn't the intended feeling, but it was like a fun way to like acknowledge the like format and physicality of a comic book. Well, all right, Mark, before I get to like my big issue with this comic, which I've teased earlier, let's talk about the Slack.
Well, hundreds of listeners like you hang out in our community of Spider-Man fans on Slack. The amazing Spider Slack community is absolutely free to join, and you can jump into active conversations with awesome people about collecting, conventions, movies, new comics, old comics, and more. Dan, what has been going on in the Slack this week?
Well, every month at a certain time of month, they release the solicits for the 3 or 4 months down the road, and we just got a solicit for post-Venom War. The Venom title is going to be relaunched as all new Venom with a new gold Venom design, and it actually looks really cool. And Al Ewing is staying on, maybe doing a little more grounded storytelling with Venom. And the big hook is, who is in the Venom suit? And one of the things that's kind of gotten me going in the Slack is that one of the people that they teased as potentially being in the Venom suit is none other than Robbie Robertson, which I have my theories about. I can't tell, and maybe this is where we truly know we've like crossed the Rubicon mark, is I can't tell if this is like elite level self-aware trolling of like, who would be the last cast member of the Spider-Man cast to become a symbiote infused character, and making a joke out of it by suggesting that it could be Robbie Robertson? Or is this truly the like fourth horse of the apocalypse and a sign that we've truly lost the thread? That is a serious thing we should be considering. And I can't tell if it's like, we've gone so far down this road, I can't tell if it's an elite level joke or if it's truly something they want us to consider. What are your thoughts on this, Mark?
I mean, this is why I don't look at previews, Dan, because like if I had known about this prior to coming on this show, I would have just been like, we're done. We can't do this. We can't talk about this day. So I have no opinions because I'm going to pretend this doesn't exist. How's that sound? This is the Madam Web of comic book storylines. Does that make sense?
It's just so funny because it's just thrown in there. It's like there's a list of 3 names and like, and Robbie, or could it be Robbie Robertson? And it's like, you can't expect us to have read that normally. Like that cannot just be a name you throw in a list of is it Mac Gargan? Is it a Cree or is it Robbie Robertson? I had no idea how I was supposed to take that, and I'm choosing for my own sanity that it's a joke. I think I have to remain sane at this point. So. Anyway, you can join in on this fun as my brain slowly unravels in front of the rest of the Slack in our amazing Slack. There's a link in the description of this episode that'll let you sign up in less than a minute, and you can come join our approaching 1,000 strong members of the Slack. It's an awesome place to talk about Spider-Man.
All right, Dan. What you've been teasing it all episode. What's your beef? Where's the beef?
Yeah, I don't know if this is really the big tease of this episode. The big tease is coming with the artist announcement that we have that's going to get us in trouble with Marvel. But my biggest criticism or beef rather with this issue is and maybe this goes back to your reasoning for why you didn't want to introduce jurisprudence into the world of Amazing Spider-Man, is that the whole issue I couldn't help but thinking, and I thought this last issue too is, but this issue really seems to lock it in, is I can't help but feel that on the surface of this, the writing of Tombstone here is incredibly dumb. And maybe this is one of those issues where my opinion of it is going to dramatically change based on what happens next. And boy, have we said that a lot of times. I'm thinking back to Amazing Spider-Man 25 and being no, they can still pull it off in the next issue where they reveal what's really going on here.
Sure.
And here's the problem. Here's why I think it's so dumb, is that we've established in previous issues that he's angry at Janice for turning state's witness. But what's the plan here? To kill her so that she doesn't speak at the trial? Wouldn't everybody know that he's the one that killed her? So the option is either that it's really dumb writing for Tombstone, that or that he's so angry that his decision-making process from a typically abnormally smart guy who we've seen pull the wool over our eyes twice, has been clouded beyond logic, okay? Because this doesn't make sense. Or is there something else going on here, and what we're seeing is not really how it appears? And with Tombstone in this run, I've kind of learned to expect that what I'm seeing is not really what's going on. So have you respond to my assertion that this is dumb of Tombstone? Do you agree with that?
I mean, no, I don't. I don't think. I think in a real world scenario, is this dumb? Yes. In a comic book world, is this dumb? No. Because I guess to your first question, so what's he going to do? Kill her and then, kill the star witness? But who is going to witness her being killed? Spider-Man. Is Spider-Man going to get up on the witness stand and testify against Tomb? What is this? I mean, when have we ever seen that in a comic book? Why can't Spider-Man go and get Doc Ock put away and Norman Osborn put away? This that's not how comics work. You know what I mean?
Okay, but then it goes back to your very reasoning why you didn't want the law introduced into this in the first place.
Right. But that's the thing. You remove that, and it's just we've seen this in countless pieces of nonfiction, not just comic books. There's a star witness, you kill the star witness. You know what I mean? That's how it's done. It's an acceptable fact that someone is going to try, and without the proper witness. I mean, there was no one physically in the vicinity of Janice, because that's the logical fallacy right there. And we got that last issue, which was why did everyone leave Janice? What the hell is happening here?
We do get no answer for why Tombstone has blood on him in this issue. So we don't find out if those were guards or whatever that we thought would be revealed, and that's not revealed here. Like
Sure.
who he killed on the way to Janice. I guess we can assume that someone was protecting her. Like 'cause who else did Tombstone harm to get up there?
Right.
So like we can assume there was some level of protection. But my pushback to this is very public. Like there are full scenes of him running around and Spider-Man saving people that are dodging out of the way. Like people are seeing this.
Well, right. I mean, people also saw him beating the crap out of Peter, earlier in the arc as well. I would also say, to your second point, is Tombstone's so angry that he's been clouded. I would say yes to a point, but I'm sure like this is a guy who keeps getting away with it. You know what I mean? Like so, like what makes anyone think that he could do something like this and still not get away with it? He got let out on bail for attempted murder one issue earlier. You know what I mean? Like the guy thinks he's invincible. You know what I mean? And rightly so. Like it's comic book logic that the bad guy is going to probably get away with it unless the good guy slaps him in cuffs or webbing or whatever it turns out to be. So I guess that's the thing. Like and again, this goes back to why I hate the fact that they went this route in the first place with the storyline. It's like you're introducing a line of logic that we don't normally have to contemplate because the logic in the first place was flawed, and now that makes the logic here flawed. And, like, let's just get back to the core of the story, which is that Tombstone is a dangerous, deranged person who would kill his own daughter to protect himself, and Spider-Man's got to save the day. And on that level, it makes sense, and no one is being dumb. That's the thing.
Okay, but my pushback to that is I don't believe that that's who Tombstone is. Like, we have that flashback with him and Kingpin in, on a safari, and it's Kingpin who's telling him, look at that lion that's killed its cub. And Tombstone says, you would kill a kid? And Kingpin says, I would kill my own son if it meant holding on to power. And I just don't know that I believe that that's who Tombstone is. And I think he says a line in this that makes me feel that way. He says to Janice, I never wanted you to see this part of my life. Right. And maybe it means that she's about to suffer like the consequences of it. But I think it could also very well mean that he's making actions that are going to keep Janice away from this line of work, no matter what it takes from him.
I mean, at the same time, he had opportunities to kill her and doesn't succeed.
Yes.
So maybe this is who he is and that he's not going to go through with it. We don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's my point is I think there's something else going on here than Tombstone is just out to kill Janice. And maybe it's just because I don't buy that. Like, I don't buy that Tombstone is someone that would kill his own daughter, no matter like how much she has wronged him. That just doesn't seem like the guy that we've been reading.
Right.
And so like either the book didn't do the work to convince me of Tombstone's change, or I think that there is something else going on here.
I mean, I see what you're saying, but I guess like I'm kind of taking like the Schrodinger's cat approach here, which is like it could be either,
Yeah,
like we don't know until we open the box, which is the next issue or the next two issues, you know what I mean, in terms of where we're at. But like I actually feel like it could just be that he wants to kill her, and if that's the case, like on a pure primal level, it works for me, but it could be more going on here. And if that's the case, it also works for me because of previous stories. I like, that's the thing. I don't feel like the previous stories negate the fact that Tombstone is so deranged and angry right now that he would try and murder his daughter. At the same time, I could see it being something else. I don't have an issue with either outcome right now in terms of how this is being set up, because again, I feel like we had a lot of work put in to these two characters here, and we've like kind of reached this like fever pitch where like logic and intellectual maneuvering has kind of reached an impasse, and now we are at a point where it is just brute force and primal nature that's taking over for all of these characters. It is a crescendo. We are in the end game, if you will. We have 2 issues left after this. So I think like it can be anything, and anything is justified, in my opinion. I get that it's not everyone's opinion, but that's why it works for me.
Yeah, and that's just a difference of opinion, which you and I it seems increasingly
that's just like
rare.
Your opinion, man.
Yeah. But like I think the next issue could justify either, but right now I'm not convinced. Like that this story has like it's not convinced me that Tombstone would act this way, and I'm much more prepared for like a hard swerve. And which gets me asking, like, you know, like for what audience is Tombstone doing what he's doing? Because he either means it or he doesn't mean it. And this is all a performance, you know, and, you know, if no one, like in the beginning, nobody is seeing him attack Janice except for Janice. So is the motivation to scare her and not actually kill her? You know, he does miss her with every shot of his gun. And it, you know, takes great detail to show, like ping, 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 all the shots that like go out of his way to miss her. But at the same time, you're right. He does have her in his hands a number of times with the intent to kill. Would he go through with it? I guess we don't know. We know he's trying to kill Spider-Man to prove to these other gang lords that like, you know, he's the top dog and he's not working with Spider-Man. So is this a way of him drawing out, you know, Spider-Man by going after Janice? That seems silly, considering that he leaves Spider-Man during the chase to go after Janice. So that doesn't really make much sense. You know, like, or is he like pulling a Kingpin where, you know, this feint, or what if it ends up being that to kill Janice is a way of showcasing his power to the other, you know, like crime lords. So the next question I would ask in that regard is he and Janice, are they in on this together to give everyone a loud show with no consequences so that he can obfuscate himself of the Spider-Man problem without losing all of these other things? Like I think there are many options for this to not be what it is. And I just wanted to put that out there because personally, I don't buy it, and maybe I'm trying to do work that I feel like the writer could do, but like I'm not yet ready to like I just don't buy it, and maybe I'm just looking for a reason to buy it in another way. So I don't know.
All right. Well, we have reached an impasse, Dan. We don't do that very often.
No, I think our grades are going to be probably quite different from each other. So
I don't know. We'll see. I mean,
yeah,
like you were high on the first 2 issues, and you know, again, I'm not saying that I thought this was like all-timer or anything like that, but I'm just saying I liked it more than I liked the previous 2. But like, we'll see how our relative scale goes. All right, what you want me to go first, or just set
Rochambeau, you know?
All right,
yeah.
I'm giving it a B+. I think, you know, which is higher than the first 2 issues of this arc. I think, you know, I don't think it's A quality, but it's a B+ for me.
And I was thinking C+ on this one. So a bit divergent, but only because I just don't buy the motivation of Tombstone. And I could very easily change this if next issue it throws me for a loop or shows me what I was seeing is, you know, something else. But I just don't feel like I buy that Tombstone would be this dumb. And I'm going to keep saying it. I think what he's doing here is dumb.
I just feel like this is very standard supervillain type stuff. I don't see anything about. I mean, I don't know. Like,
I don't disagree with you on that. I just think it's very standard supervillain stuff in a story that was like, let's bring the law and logic into this. And I'm like, you can't just abandon that. You introduced it.
And I thought that was dumb. So that's why I'm like, yay, let's just get back to beating the crap out of each other and Tombstone being a murderous thug. Because that works for me. That's what I want these characters to be.
Fair enough, Mark. Let it be known, Mark's favorite issues of Amazing Spider-Man are just two dudes wailing on each other.
I mean, give me Fire Lord versus Spider-Man, right? I mean...
Absolutely. Well, with that comes the end of our review. So let's take it over to myself from a couple nights ago, talking to our video editor, Alex Galucki, after we left Baltimore Comic-Con. All right, everybody, welcome back. I teased at the beginning of this episode that Alex Galucki, our video editor, will be joining me here on the podcast to talk about our time at Baltimore Comic-Con this past weekend. I love Baltimore Comic-Con. It's one of my favorite conventions, and I haven't been in about a decade because I moved to Los Angeles. But now that I'm back here in Baltimore, calling it my home, one of the things I was looking forward to the most was going to Baltimore Comic-Con. Alex happens to live, about an hour and a half, 2 hours away, Alex?
Yeah, about 2 hours. And this is actually my very first time going to Baltimore Comic-Con.
So let's hear your impressions of the convention overall, because like I said, it's one of my favorites, and longtime listeners of the show can probably go back to our Superior Spider Talk days to experience why. Like, I got a dozen amazing interviews out of Baltimore Comic-Con last time, and I can talk to the specificity of that, but I want to hear your particular impressions of it as a first-time attendee.
Yeah, gladly. I mean, you've kind of hyped me up for years, ever since you did the original, like, a batch of interviews you did, and your description of it being very comics-oriented, very much excited me, personally. And I gotta say, it lived up to the hype. This was an exciting convention. I was blown away by just how much there was to do, how many creators there were to just talk to, and they were all, the ones that I talked to were all super friendly.
Yeah, it kind of works as an interesting kind of like sister convention to New York Comic Con, but on a much smaller scale. And I don't mean that in terms of like the number of people attending in terms of guests and stuff like that, but like it's at Baltimore, it's more intimate. I think this was one of the quieter shows that I've been to of Baltimore in general. Like, I was used to a little more traffic at the convention, but maybe it's just that like I hadn't been in a while and my expectations have been like altered by living in LA and going to like bigger conventions. But I think the main appeal is that like there are the Ringo Awards named after deceased artist Mike Waringo. And they award it's not the Eisners, but it's kind of like the other big awards, for comics. And so a lot of people who are big names in the industry come down to Baltimore for that very reason. And because a lot of the old guard is still fairly East Coast dominant in terms of like the old Marvel at New York City and all that stuff. So it tends to be like a pretty solid New York Comic-Con alternative, but without the crowds. And the kind of result of that is you get all of these big name creators and no lines at all to talk to them. What was the kind of like big experience with that for you? Like, what was the one that set you kind of most back?
I mean, I was kind of impressed by the fact that Ryan Otley, for instance, his line was short, and I was expecting him to have a massive line. But I was able to get to him within not even like 3 minutes, and I had him do a sketch on a blank variant cover, and he did it very quickly. He was super nice to talk to. Unfortunately, no, don't expect an interview from him. He does not do interviews. But he was very, very kind. We had a good conversation about the comic that I had him sign, and for the record, it was issue 25 of Volume 5, a.k.a. the issue that passes the Bechdel test.
Yeah, right. One of the few. And I think the convention and the convention's orientation with podcasting has kind of changed. Like, I noticed some people doing interviews there, but I think I felt kind of weird about asking people to step aside from their tables to do an interview in the way I maybe wouldn't have felt awkward 10 years ago. It's just the reality is like post-COVID, the world has changed and these kind of interviews are very easy to conduct on Zoom. So we didn't really walk away with a bunch of interviews with creators. I think we could have, but I think it just makes more sense for us to have gotten a friendly connection, put a name to a face, and establish interviews for later. So like what I hope is you'll see down the pike the fruits of our labors reflected in the podcast in a form of different interviews. Before we get to who we talked to and a brief rundown of that, like what was it like spending time together? I mean, you and I had met before this, Alex, right, and we've been talking on the internet, but I don't think we've spent this much sustained time together. You know, Mark had certainly an impression of spending time with me. You know, have this sort of like parasocial relationship with me. Mm-hmm. You know, like you've been experiencing not only editing, but also like, you know, talking to me. What's it like to be in Gavazdin's presence for this long?
Well, first of all, you and your family were wonderful hosts. You guys allowed me to stay in your house absolutely free. I really appreciated that. It was nice getting to meet you and your family as well. Ben is an adorable kid. He's super fun to hang out with.
That's kind of you to say, yeah.
Fun fact, we were on a mission to find an Iron Man plushie because he just loves Iron Man. And I was able to spot him out of the corner of my eye. I was like, Dan, I found it. So that was great. But it was just great getting to hang out with you this whole weekend. And, you know, just going through all the comics together. Because we kind of went, I'm not going to lie, we went a little crazy with our purchases.
Yes.
And we were enabling each other. We're terrible influences. But it was fun.
So we found the spot. I think it was called Victory Comics,
which is a great store, by the way. It's just outside of DC, and I've spent a lot of money there. I'm gonna be honest.
I'm worried that I discovered this because it was like perfect. They had like $2 bins that were perfect, like great quality issues. Yes. Like everything I brought home was at least like good, you know, or like very fine, you know. And everything was $2, and it was organized with my CLZ app so that I could just plow through what I'm missing and then some, you know, and Alex and I were just enabling each other, with like, hey, have you ever seen this? No, I'm buying it. And, things got a little bit out of control enough that the people managing the booth came over and were like, do you mind if we take some of those comics away from you guys and hold on to them because your stack is getting too big? So, yeah. So speaking of which, okay, like what was your biggest kind of like, we're collectors, right? And people maybe know your history, Alex, but you have like every B title under the sun. Like what were you looking for at this convention and did you pull it off?
Yes. So I do have complete runs of every ongoing B title of Spider-Man, whereas Dan was missing a few, which I guess we'll talk about in a moment. But I'm kind of on a quest it's a crazy quest, I'll admit, of collecting every single appearance of Spider-Man. I'm pulling a Doc Spidey. I'm collecting everything. So the big thing I was looking for was Strange Tales Annual #2, which for those who don't know was Spider-Man's first guest appearance in another book outside of his own. And I found it within 2 minutes of walking into the convention for a very, very good price. Now, I'll admit, it is not the best looking copy. It's got some tears on the bottom of the cover. But as far as Silver Age non-ASM books go, my standards are very much different. So I don't mind one bit. And I was able to knock $25 off of it anyways. So I won there. But then I was also... I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, but then the other book I was looking for was an upgrade of my copy of Amazing Spider-Man #8, where my original copy has a huge chunk of the cover cut out because of the ads. And yes, people cut comic covers. It's crazy. But I bought it when I was 15 years old back in 2011, and the sole reason I did it, it was $50, and it was an opportunity to buy a single-digit issue of ASM, and I kept it ever since. But I was like, you know what? I could do better, and I did.
Yeah, you found a really nice copy for a reasonable price, and I tend to be very dubious about convention pricing. I feel like a lot of these dealers kind of take advantage of like casual buyers. I don't know who drops the amount of money you dropped casually, but I think people do who don't really want to go searching on the internet and stuff like that. And like the prices are usually inflated when honestly they should be deflated, given that you paid to get into the space.
You would think.
But if you have the patience enough to like really comparison shop, every once in a while you can find a real deal, and I feel like you did. Quickly for me, my goal for this, I didn't really have a goal, but the goal that there was, I'm like 3 issues away from completing like all of the major Spider-Man runs that aren't amazing. Web of, Adjectiveless, Spectacular, Unlimited. And I will say, like, we completed all of them on this trip, and that felt really good. The big one was we were looking for Spectacular 251, which is this random JMD Craven issue that I have been looking for years, because I have a pretty solid policy about only buying stuff if I find it in person. And I was insistent that this book just didn't exist. I mean, it's like a $2 book, but like it was never in anyone's kind of like long boxes to buy. And we went to, I got to think, like easily a dozen or more shops looking for this thing, and it just didn't exist. And I think probably truly the last shop we didn't check had it. And it wasn't even like displayed on the front. It was like you were flipping through the books, and it was on the back of one of the, bags and boards that you had to flip over to find it. And so that was really like a great moment to finally complete my Spectacular run. And
well, congratulations.
So that was fun.
Dan.
And thank you. Not as cool as getting ASM 8. It's Spectacular 251, but you know what? I'll take it. All right, let's quickly run down who we talked to because I actually have to get going soon.
Okay.
So the first few are yours. Tell us a little bit about some of these people you chatted with.
Absolutely. So the very first person I chatted with was Scott Hanna. So I brought a few books to have get some signatures on. Scott being one of them. I had him sign Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, Number 5, a.k.a. the Zeb Wells Tombstone issue, where it's got the really, really cool page of Spider-Man, like, really, like, trying to sympathize with Tombstone.
Yeah.
But as soon as I showed it to Scott, he's like, oh, I love this. It's one of my favorite issues. And we were talking about the run, how much I've been enjoying his work with JRJR, and how he's like, yeah, I've been in this business for like 32 years. And, between my work with JRJR and Mark Bagley, I've been doing Spider-Man comics pretty much every year, except for like maybe 2 years. And he claims that he's like he's worked the most on Spider-Man, like as far as inking goes.
Okay. So
he was a lovely man to talk to. Like I said earlier, I chatted with Otley for a little bit. He was super nice. Stegman was another guy I chatted with a little bit. I bought a few prints from him. In fact, his guy tempted me to buy some more prints, and you know what? Peer pressure worked, so I did.
And they're really nice prints too.
Yes.
I was actually surprised at the affordability of a lot of the prints here. I mean, obviously they do larger print runs than like we do for our show, but and they're the artists, so it's only time for them, that is going into the work. But I was really pleased. You picked up some really cool prints.
Thank you.
All right, so the rest of these guests were people that we talked to together, which made it even more fun. Some are people we've talked to on the show before. Others are people that, most of which I would say, like, were very enthusiastic about potentially coming on the show. So I think there's a lot of potential here. I wanted to mention, straight up at the top of this list, that we had a chance to talk to Matt Wieringo, who is Mike Wieringo's brother. If you don't know, Mike Wieringo was a Spider-Man artist, amongst many other things. I guess the most recent work people might know him from is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man that he did with Peter David back in the sort of like JMS time period of the book, early 2000s. He also did Sensational Spider-Man, and has made other appearances, but he passed away 17 years ago, which is a fact that I was blown away by because I remember when Mike passed away. But his family is behind a lot of what brought Baltimore, the Ringo Awards, which are named after, the Waringos or Mike Waringo. So it was nice to talk to Matt about his memories of his brother, his interest in the character of Spider-Man, and that was something that I thought was neat. If only to be reminded how long it's been since Mike was with us.
Indeed, yes.
And sitting right next to Matt was Todd DeZago. A name you don't hear very much about, even though he's done a lot of work on the Spider-Man character over the years. I think, hardcore fans of the character are going to remember that he and Mike did Sensational Spider-Man together, which I think is an underrated run. Certainly an off-kilter run, but I think amongst a certain group of people, it's like a quietly beloved run of Spider-Man comics. Do you have any feelings about those comics and talking to Todd?
Honestly, I've not read all of Sensational Spider-Man. I've read a small handful of Clone Saga material, including a really fun Swarm story.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I can't say I've read the whole thing. But from what I've read, it's kind of fun. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, Todd couldn't have been nicer too. I mean, he was just I've never met him in person, so that was a real pleasure, and I hope to have him on the show soon. You drew my attention towards Al Milgram's table. Tell us about your interaction with Al, because he has a special place in your heart.
He does, and that is because in addition to having he had a run on Spectacular Spider-Man, right?
Yes, yeah.
All right, so in addition to that, he co-created my all-time favorite C or D list level Spider-Man villain, the Spot. I love the Spot. So much so that he was selling poster prints of his covers, and one of which was the cover of Spectacular Spider-Man 99, which is the first Spot cover. And that made me very happy. And so I have it. I'm going to get a frame for it, and it's going to be glorious.
Yeah, I mean, Al was on Spectacular for quite some time, and left a real big imprint on that book, including, like you said, creating so many of these characters. But even just bumping into Al, first of all, he was hilarious and had a real good sense of humor about the popularity of some of his creations. And he had a T-shirt on that said "Convention Al," which got me to have a laugh, with 3 big pockets on the front. I mean, just like a guy that is like not taking himself terribly seriously. And I think of all the people we talked to, and somebody else we're going to mention later, like, I think Al was probably the most excited about the potential of coming on our show. So, and we were excited too, because he was hilarious, and I think will make for an excellent guest. So speaking of guests, one of our, frequent guests on the show, Tom Brevoort, was there supporting the Heroes Initiative, and actually won a Ringo Award, in the show for, I believe, his charity work. So, which anybody that knows Tom knows he's like the nicest guy. And, I made sure I wanted to talk to him to thank him again for being such a supporter of our show and for his amazing Substack, which he has linked to our Substack through, which was really nice of him. He didn't have to do it, and it brings us a lot of attention to our fairly dormant Substack for the moment. For now, like, we would love to bring it back. It just really comes down to time in the day for Mark and I. And meeting with Tom, he immediately started up the annual fight again. He was like, I thought I solved this. Dan's right. The annuals count, and I'm not just making that up. Alex, you can back me up on this,
I was
right?
there. Mark, if you're listening to this part, you're still on the losing side, apparently.
Well, I even brought up Mark's Amazing Fantasy 15, and I don't, like he obviously Tom recognized that for what it was. He was like, Dan, just go buy an Amazing Fantasy 15 and put this to rest. And I'm like, yeah, I wish I had that kind of finances, but what are you gonna do? So it was great to reconnect with Tom. He remains one of my favorite people in the industry. Especially for his indexical knowledge. We also bumped into a friend of mine, Alex Segura, who I have known for a while, even before his Spider-Man work. He was on the show shortly ago to talk about his Aranya and Spider-Man 2099 Dark Tomorrow book. And since then has gotten a number of one-shots and is now doing Spider Society, which has been a lot of fun, despite my reticence, to pick up a new Spider-Verse story, which I think Alex kind of jokingly accepted. I think he understands that. But I think he's doing cool things with that title anyway. And he was there on the behalf of the Heroes Initiative. Alex was a teacher of mine a number of years back for comic writing and pitching. And he's been kind of coaching me into the comic space ever since, and just been a good friend and Spider-Man fan. So it was good to meet him in person for the first time. And he definitely wants to come on the show to talk Spider Society either before or after it wraps up. And I'm excited about that. I bet we can work something out before the trade drops. Alex, what did you think of meeting another Alex?
Right. He made a joke as such. But anyways, just super nice guy. Just really fun to listen to. And nothing but not much else to add.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is most of these people end up being quite nice, which brings me to Greg Land. Who I actually thought was quite nice too. I mean, he admittedly told us he does not do interviews, and as such, I assume he's not listening to this. And I'm not afraid to say I've been trying to get Greg on the show. I've been very interested in getting him on the show, and I know he carries with him a bad stigma, one which I largely agree with. But I want to know more about him and his process, and I don't know how we would address all the blowback to him and the outright art theft. But he keeps getting hired, and I want to know what that relationship is like. And I feel just talking to him at the con gave me some insight into it. I asked a couple of, I don't even know if they were probing questions.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, because he's doing the alien work, and I said, oh, it must be fun to draw the xenomorph, knowing that his Alien #1 was an outright stolen image from its first cover that received a lot of blowback on the internet, and he was like, yeah, no, it is fun, but they always want corrections, and they're all Disney is very particular about how different elements are portrayed, and I'm always drawing stuff and redrawing stuff according to their, specifics, and to me, that was an interesting insight because my takeaway is Land really feels like a work for hire guy. He really feels like a guy you hire based on whatever specifications you want, and he can soundly pull it off, but is not really he's willing to do reworkings, and he's not really doing it necessarily out of passion. Am I mischaracterizing this? How did you feel?
I don't know. I mean, he meets deadlines. I'll give him that. And I guess that's why.
Well, no, but I mean, how did you feel based off of talking to him? We know that he makes deadlines,
Sure.
and he's hired by Marvel and Disney all the time to take on flagship characters. I mean, did you get any more out of the conversation, or am I reaching?
I don't think you're reaching. But I mean, like you said, he seemed like a genuinely nice guy. Maybe he doesn't want to come on the show because I think he may be aware of the backlash he's received over the years.
Yes. And again, I think it's deserved backlash, not even for his so-called adult film faces, as people have put it, I think art theft is really like there is swiping and then there is art theft, and those are I think there's a pretty clear distinction between the two. But say what you will. I thought he was genuinely interested in answering some of the questions that we had, about his work, and admitted himself that the show was not really moving the dial for him in terms of sales, and maybe that's because his name has become what it is. But anyway, he was nice, and I don't want to badmouth him, any further. I'm genuinely interested in him as an artist. I think there are places in the industry for work for hire or, artists that are like known to deliver X, Y, and Z rather than like people who are pushing the limits. Like it takes all types. So speaking of of that, like in terms of like whether you're work for hire or someone who's got a real definitive style, like we bumped into Enid Balam, who was in town, and immediately recognizable for his Spider-Gwen banner, and he was on Spider-Gwen Smash, which we had Melissa Flores on, and Enid expressed an interest in coming on the show, although English isn't his, first language.
But he could not have. You.
Yeah, I didn't think it's a problem. And I thought he was a super nice guy, and I think his artwork is really fun and full of style. And that he was a really pleasant surprise to talk to. I'd love to get him to do a commission for our Patreon. I'm not sure that he quite understood what I was asking about when I was asking for a commission, but I'm definitely going to follow up with him on that. Alex, anything stand out to you about talking to Enid?
We had you guys had a fun conversation about tattoos because he had some rad tattoos.
Yeah, I threw out there the idea like there's a Spider-Man tattoo that I've been considering getting, and he was very like push back on the idea of bringing art to tattoo artists, which I get, but like sometimes you just want something in particular, and he was saying that he lets his tattoo artist do whatever he wants to Enid's body, and that would fill me with anxiety. I could not put that much trust in someone else to deliver on that. And there's a particular Steve Ditko drawing of Spider-Man, the first one from Amazing Fantasy 15, page 1, that I would like to get, and because it's imperfect, and I feel like I would be less critical of it. Being on my body rather than looking at something perfect, like say a John Romita Jr. illustration, and having the curves not be exactly what I would want. Anyway, I was trying to explain all this to him, and he looked at the drawing and he was like, "That's quite creepy," and yeah, admittedly so. My wife thinks the same thing, but that's kind of what I like about it. Anyway, this is becoming about me, but I like that he didn't dress up his feelings about my potentially creepy tattoo that I'm interested in. So that was fun. Then we talked to friend of the show, Ron Garney, who has been on the show a long time ago, and fans of the show of our show will know that Ron Garney had perhaps the most unhinged introduction to the show of all time. Back when we used to do introductions from the artists, he would like slip mid-interview or mid-introduction into like a Vincent Price voice, amongst other things. And peeling back the curtain, Mark and I joke about Ron Garney's interview all the time with each other for how unhinged it was. And we both don't know Ron Garney well. So when he came on the show and was just so bizarre, we were like, is that what he's like? And I don't know, what was your impression of Ron Garney at the convention, Alex?
Well, based on what he was talking about, he's like that in other interviews and podcasts. So
yeah, but because he's in on the joke, like he was super normal at the show.
He was absolutely. I mean, he just seemed like I've been saying with a bunch of these guys, he's just a really chill dude, and I just enjoyed talking to him for the little time that we had.
Yeah, but he admitted that he had just gotten off of another interview and had done the same thing. So it must be some kind of joke for him. But to his credit, he recognized me immediately
That's
from
right.
like almost 10 years ago. I think we had him on the show. I mean, it was a long time ago.
Right.
And he was like, "Oh yeah, that was a fun interview," and I was like, "Yeah, we still joke about your like crazy voices," and he's like, "I know, I just did it again." So that was funny, and I can't wait to tell Mark about that because that interview certainly stuck out in my mind. If you haven't listened to that interview, it's worth going back for because Ron definitely gave us a special treat there. And then more on my personal side of things, we met up with Scott Larson, who is not a Spider-Man artist, although maybe someday. Scott does his own indie comic, Visitations, and Scott has been a longtime supporter of our show. And wrote me an email back in our earliest days about how he sold his collection away and has been slowly reclaiming it. And he's been the nicest guy. I've done interviews for him on a podcast or interview series that he does. So it was nice to finally meet him in person in Baltimore, where he had his Edgar Allan Poe bust and just the most encouraging guy. And if you haven't checked it out yet, look up his Visitation comic. Every issue is like the most inventive new thing. The styles change issue to issue. One issue, you have to rotate it while you're reading it.
Yeah.
Another looks like Sunday Funnies. Like really inventive stuff. Nice guy. And he's got a great kind of like online Facebook presence for his kind of daily sketches and things like that. So that was really exciting. Mm-hmm. But we've saved the most exciting part for last, and a big tease that you and I have kind of been putting out there in both our Slack and at the beginning of this episode, is that we talked to someone at Baltimore Comic-Con that kind of like dropped a bomb on us in terms of the future of Amazing Spider-Man. But I'm going to leave you to talk about how this kind of came about, Alex, because you made the first discovery about this, which then allowed me to kind of facilitate it into getting more discoveries out of it.
Right. So every once in a while, I'll check the Amazon listings of Amazing Spider-Man, future solicited issues of Amazing Spider-Man for the any updated credits of giant-sized issues. So in this case, issue 60, the final Zeb Wells issue, where they teased that there's going to be a team of artists, but we don't know who besides JR and Ed McGuinness. But then one day, Amazon, out of the blue, gave us the full credits, and among those names was Mark Buckingham. And I was like, Mark Buckingham? On Amazing Spider-Man? Because I'll just come out and say it. I adore Mark Buckingham's work with Paul Jenkins in the early 2000s. His run on Peter Parker's Spider-Man is really, really good. That alongside JMS's, JRJR, that is just the best time to be a Spider-Man fan, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so for people who haven't read that, what do you think makes Mark Buckingham's work stand out? I mean, he's famous for a ton of other stuff. His work on Fables, he did 160 issues of Fables, but what makes his Spider-Man unique to you?
In a lot of ways, his style almost looks like a modernized Romita Sr., frankly. But I think what separates it is that he tells a lot of really grounded stories of Spider-Man. I mean, he does some really good action sequences. I'm thinking of the Fusion storyline with the better Fusion, not the one from JRJR.
Yes.
But the one with Fusion and Dr. Octopus is a really fun story. But then he also did the Heroes Don't Cry story, which was one of your guys' essentials way back in the day. It's a really lovely story, and just the notion of getting more Buckingham, in whatever fashion it may be, genuinely excited me when I saw that listing on Amazon.
Yeah, so we were like, great, we got to talk to Mark Buckingham and find out what that is, okay? And so we get in his line. There was one person in front of us that was having him sign some stuff. And he just kind of casually drops to that person, "Oh, yeah, I'm back on Spider-Man again." And he's like, I just want to try my hand back again at superheroes for fun. I've been doing some things with Marvel, but I'm really on Spider-Man, and like I'm really excited about that. And he didn't know who I was from Adam, just kind of hanging out in line. And I feel a little nervous talking about this now because, like, I hope it's not betraying his trust, because going up to him and talking to him when he found out that we had a Spider-Man podcast, he kind of changed his tune a little bit from how candid he was being with the guy in front of us, to be like, oh yeah, it's an 8-page backup in issue 60 and there maybe is more to come. Right. Whereas with the guy before us, he was like flat out saying like, I'm working with Joe Kelly in specific on a run of Spider-Man, and not in a way that made it sound like he was just doing the like an issue or two of 8 deaths of Spider-Man.
Right.
Because I don't think I would have used the word I'm on a run or I'm doing a run of Spider-Man if I was doing 1 or 2 issues of a series, Mm-hmm. And the way that he was like talking about how much he enjoyed doing it to both us and him, like, and really reinvesting in the character, makes me think that whatever the next team is, which I think JR is hanging around,
Yes.
like I wonder if we're getting the best of the early 2000s back on the book as the creative leads with Joe Kelly, which is very exciting. And I have been like vocally critical of the idea of Joe Kelly coming back on the book, mostly because I find a lot of his modern work completely indecipherable and just kind of like sloppily written. But I know Joe Kelly paired with good artists is a different Joe Kelly. And if he's paired with JR and Mark Buckingham, both of whom are writers, I think, who kind of ground are artists rather that ground writers, I think we could have something good here that bucks my inherent skepticism about Joe Kelly being on the book. How do you feel about that?
Brother, let me tell you, a Mark Buckingham and Joe Kelly joint has me super, super excited. I can't lie. Because look, say what you will about Joe Kelly, he has it in him to tell really, really good stories. We've seen it. We've not seen it a lot recently, but he can do it. But I just think he needs the right artist to just hone him down and tell some good Spider-Man stories. And I think Mark Buckingham is the guy.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I don't know how much of the Mark Buckingham run was Paul Jenkins,
Right.
But like the same way that like I like the post Buckingham Jenkins stuff, but I don't think it's as strong as the Buckingham Jenkins stuff. The same way I don't think JMS is as strong once JR leaves. So I have to assume that like there is a special kismet with some of these artists that massively improves or changes the direction that the Spider-Man stories go in. The same way I would say about the Wells stuff. Like, have I loved every JR story on Wells? No, but they're vastly superior in my mind to almost any other creative pairing in that run, right? So, like, that has me optimistic. I'm still extremely dubious about 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, if only just on the premise alone. Sounds like something I'm deeply uninterested in reading. And the more we find out about it, the more I'm like, what even is this? But if Buckingham is going to hang around for a longer run after that, I am on board. That is enough for me to give it a very serious shot.
I am right there with you.
And, then we had just had a great conversation with Buckingham in general about like typeface.
He was the loveliest man to talk to. He was delightful.
I got to ask him about like the dog from the Paul Jenkins run where Peter had a neighbor with a dog that eventually like it was implied it was building a bomb or it was a robot or something, and we never got a resolution to it. So
and the answer that he gave was that there was no answer.
Yes, exactly. So like that long simmering mystery still simmers. But the better news is he is the most keen on coming on our show. So I would expect, a Mark Buckingham interview in the very near future. We'll probably wait until after issue 60 so we can talk about that story and hopefully whatever is announced about his ongoing work on Amazing Spider-Man by that point. But he was super nice, very keen to chat with us. And
we talked about typeface, and it was delightful.
Yeah. We got the whole history of the creation of typeface. And also that he has not seen Across the Spider-Verse. So
neither did Al Milgrom, now that I think about it.
Yeah, Al Milgrom hadn't seen it either. And I'm like, what do we have to do to get you guys to watch your bizarre creations animated on screen? Like, that seems to be an ongoing trend with some of these creators is they don't really follow through on, like, seeing that their creations have been adapted to the big screen, which, like, okay, but, like, don't you want to see that? I don't know. Maybe that was what makes the difference between us and creators is that like they create stuff and then don't follow through. I don't know. Maybe it's weird to see your stuff adapted, but anyway. So overall, I think a really thrilling Baltimore Comic-Con. I'm so thankful, Alex, that you could come and join me. I wouldn't have had a quarter of the fun without you there, and I think it speaks to kind of just future pairings for Amazing Spider Talk at events like this. I had a great time, and I hope you did too.
Oh, I absolutely did. Best convention I've ever been to so far. Now,
that's
granted,
so
I've
exciting.
Not been to a lot. But
yeah, and that's to say also a thank you to Baltimore Comic-Con who provided us press passes and really, like they don't really cause much of a fuss about that, and they've always been supportive of our show. And again, remains my favorite convention that I've been to. I mean, they are just very supportive of creators, big and small, and so I encourage you next time. It's usually in October or late September. Next time it rolls around, like I want to do a big event or a panel, for Spider Talk at the con. And so I hope we can make that happen. So
that'd be tight.
Yeah, if you're a listener, start eyeing Baltimore Comic-Con for next year. I know it's a year away, but I think we're going to do something special next year with them. But until then, it was great to chat with you, Alex, and great to spend the weekend with you.
My pleasure, sir. And thank you for having me stay at your place. It was a lovely, lovely weekend.
What Alex is not telling you is I just moved into a new place, and he slept on a mattress in the corner of my basement, like all alone. So you know what? Like, if you accept that as like a fine furnishings for where you are, then next year it will be even better. I promise. So
your cat cuddled up with me. It was all good.
You might even get a bedside table. So and we'll end it with that. I hope you guys enjoyed this recap of Baltimore Comic-Con.
Thanks for listening, guys.
All right, Dan, it's that time. Time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning into this episode of the Amazing Spider Talk. Also, a special thanks to Alex Galucki for joining Dan at Baltimore Comic-Con and joining us for a discussion of the event.
Yeah, I hope you guys are all as excited as we are about the idea of Mark Buckingham coming back to the book. I say coming back. I guess he never did Amazing Spider-Man. This is where someone's going to jump in and tell me that he did an odd issue or backup somewhere. But I don't think so. But I loved his work with Paul Jenkins, and under whatever auspices, I will take advantage of having Mark Buckingham doing Spider-Man art. It's something I certainly didn't think we'd get after his lengthy run on Fables and all of his independent work, to see him doing some of my favorite superheroes again. But all the stuff that we do on this podcast, including the Baltimore Comic-Con coverage, can only happen because of your listener support on Patreon. For only $3.99 a month, that's less than a new issue of Amazing Spider-Man, you can help support our show's existence while getting early episodes, including these reviews, the same week the comics release, exclusive artwork, and a ton of other bonuses. So thank you to everyone who already supports us in the work that we do, plus a special thank you to our newest contributor, Corey Pontes.
If you value smart comics criticism and historical analysis, we hope that you'll consider supporting us on Patreon. What we do on this show is admittedly niche, but we feel that we offer a valuable commentary and model fair methods of criticism for a character and medium that rarely receives that kind of consideration we believe it deserves. So please, if that is valuable to you, we can only continue doing what we do with your support on Patreon.
So Mark, until on this National Sons Day, we decide to commit filicide. Oh boy, this got dark. What's our motto?
God, talk about taking a weird, dumb turn, Dan. With great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk.
And honestly, Mark, if we commit filicide, I would hope the least of our problems would be the cancellation of this show.
Right? How about Philly side, where we just kill off Philadelphia? Can we do that?
Oh, I thought we were going to kill off a bunch of cheesesteaks, and I'm down for that.
That too, for sure.